So back when I had the original Lumix S5, one of my biggest complaints was just the lack of lenses that were available for the L mount. But now, since it's been a few years, new cameras have come out. There are a lot more lenses to choose from. So I wanted to talk about 3 of my favorite zoom lenses, and all 3 of them are actually relatively inexpensive. So the first lens on this list is also going to be the cheapest lens, and that is the Panasonic 20-60. At the wide end, you're going to get an f3.5, and at the long end, you're going to get a 5.6. So this is a variable aperture lens, but again, this is going to be your least expensive zoom lens that you can get for the L mount, and it's going to run you about $500 brand new, but I've seen it go for around $250 to $300 in the used market. So the kind of cool thing about this 20-60 is that it is a kit lens, so it'll come bundled with a lot of the Lumix S series cameras, and if you buy it bundled, then you already have a really good lens to start vlogging with, because at 20 millimeters, it's nice and wide, and even though it's only 3.5 at the wide end, it still gives you a decent amount of background separation. And a lot of people don't think much of this lens, but I actually think that it's really versatile despite being a variable aperture, kind of more on the cheap end of lenses. I actually filmed my video with the original Panasonic S5 called Rolling Odyssey. The entirety of that video was shot on this 20-60 kit lens. So as far as physical characteristics of this 20-60, it is a little bit plasticky, but still feels pretty well built, especially for such a cheap lens. It does obviously telescope when you zoom in and out, but honestly, this lens feels really good. It's nice and small again, so it's not going to be a huge weight on your camera. I believe this lens is splash and dust resistant. It's got a little rubber gasket right here, so that's really nice to see, especially on such a cheap kit lens. But yeah, overall, it feels pretty solid, and I think this is a perfect first lens to get if you have a Lumix S series camera. This lens is also among one of the smallest zoom lenses for the Lumix L mount, so this is a great lens that you can run on a gimbal as well. So now let's talk about the second lens on this list, and probably my favorite. But before we do that, let's quickly thank the sponsor of today's video, which is Wholesome Boy Co. So Wholesome is a minimalist, art-driven lifestyle brand that is working to empower you to truly wear your heart on your sleeve. The founder of Wholesome is a friend of mine, and I was really excited to have them collaborate with me on my channel. They have a great selection of high quality and really good looking products that I actually want to wear. And the really cool thing is that 15% of every sale goes to AFSP. So buying these products actually helps go to serve a bigger purpose, which I love. So be sure to use the code NB10 at checkout for an additional 10% off your purchase. Once again, big thanks to Wholesome for sponsoring this video. So the second lens on this list is the Sigma Contemporary 28-70 f2.8. Now this is a really versatile lens. It gives you a 28 millimeters, which is plenty wide for most stuff that I do. And then at the long end, you have 70 millimeters, which is a great portrait focal length. But yeah, I love this Sigma 28-70. I actually bought it pretty recently to accompany my S5II on basically everything that I shoot. This lens stays on my camera, I would say 90% of the time. So like most of Sigma's lenses, this 28-70 is very sharp, and it gives a really nice clean image. So as far as physical characteristics of this Sigma 28-70, feels really good in the hand, has a very premium feeling, not too heavy, and it's really nice and small. And if you know me, you know that I like to keep my camera gear as small as it possibly can be. This is a really nice small lens, and it pairs perfectly with Lumix S series cameras. It does telescope out when you zoom all the way to 70, but it honestly isn't that big of a deal to me. I actually still think that this lens is really nice and compact, and some of my friends were asking me if I miss the extra 4 millimeters when you're on a 24-70 as opposed to a 28-70, but honestly, I love the size that this 28-70 gives me, and even though it would maybe be nice to have a little bit wider of a field of view, I'd much rather have a smaller lens than 4 extra millimeters on the wide end. So this one's gonna be slightly more expensive, especially if you buy it new, but I've always thought that if you're gonna buy one lens, you might as well buy a really good lens that's just gonna live on your camera for the majority of the time that you use it. This is gonna cost you around $800 brand new, but I actually got my copy in the used market for around 600 bucks. So I've seen them go anywhere from like $550 all the way up to $700 in the used market. So you might have to do do a little bit of looking around for this lens if you want to get a good deal on it, but this is definitely worth the buy. So the third lens that I want to talk about is probably the one that I've used the most, and that's just because of how versatile it is. And that is the Panasonic Lumix 24-105 f4. So this lens is a real staple for a lot of videographers and photographers who just need a good all-around lens. At 24 millimeters, it's nice and wide, and you can zoom all the way into 105 and keep that constant aperture of f4. And the really cool thing is that this lens also has optical image stabilization. And if you combine that with the awesome in-body image stabilization of the Lumix S cameras, you get dual IS, which makes for really, really stable video. So as far as pricing on this lens, this is gonna be the most expensive lens out of all three of them. This is gonna run you about $1,000 brand new, but again, I've seen this lens go from anywhere from like $700 to $800 in the used market. So as far as the physical characteristics of this 24-105, it is a bit beefier of a lens than the other two that we've been talking about, but it still, again, feels really, really premium. It does telescope out as you zoom in, but that is to be expected on a 24-105. So this lens is one of the lenses that was lent to me by Lumix, so I don't get to keep this one. But I would say that if you're a event videographer, or if you shoot sports, or you just need a good all-around lens, this 24-105 is really hard to beat. It covers a really large focal range and also has a constant aperture of f4. Couple that with the fact that it's weather sealed and it has OIS. This is just a great lens that you can just slap on your camera and keep it on there all the time because you can just do so much with it. Yes, it is on the more pricey side, but I think that the price is definitely justified when you consider how much stuff you can do with this lens. Anyways, I think that's all I have for you. I want to say a big shout out again to Wholesome for sponsoring this video, and I'm going to leave you with just one piece of advice, and that is just don't